Hello and welcome to another episode of Her Entrepreneurial Rise, the podcast where we amplify the stories of women and gender-expansive leaders using entrepreneurship as a force for social change. Because their stories aren't just inspiring, they're blueprints for what's possible when equity leads the way. I'm your host, Kellen Tamarian, and I'm so honored to introduce today's guest, Nivi Achanta, founder and CEO of Soapbox Project, a 501c3 nonprofit envisioning a future where all living beings can create healthy, joyful, and resilient communities. Soapbox Project is on a mission to transform climate anxiety, loneliness, and perceived feelings of powerlessness into community-led action. Through its libraries or joyful social spaces that invite neighbors to connect, learn, and take meaningful climate action together, its bite-sized climate change letter, and its growing membership network, Soapbox Project makes activism feel good without sacrificing impact. Under Nivi's leadership, the organization is answering one of the most important questions of our time. How can we build healthy, resilient communities that bring people together and move the needle on the world's most urgent issues without burning out or giving up? Through radical imagination and intentional design, Nivi is reshaping what the future of climate action can look and feel like, ensuring that joy is not an afterthought but a strategy for change. I'm so excited to speak with her today, and I know her story and her vision for collective, joyful climate impact will leave you feeling energized and inspired to reimagine activism on your own terms. So with that, let's dive in. Hi, Nivi. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Kellen, and for that wonderful intro.
Oh my gosh, of course. I'm so excited to dive in. So kind of just to get right into it, you've spoken before about how climate anxiety and loneliness are two of the biggest barriers to action. A 2021 Lancet study found that 59% of young people worldwide feel extremely worried about climate change, and nearly half say that these feelings negatively affect their daily functioning. And at the same time, a 2025 Cigna survey found that over 57% of Americans report some level of loneliness, especially among Gen Z and millennial individuals. So I'm curious what the moment was for you that really inspired you to believe and think that I need to create something different, something that addresses both climate anxiety and despair and social isolation. Where did your vision for Soapbox Project begin?
Yeah, so I grew up in California, and many people that went to public school on the West Coast probably have similar stories of just knowing that the climate crisis was part of our lives since basically birth or our first exposure to the education system. We called it global warming back then. Now we have rebranded it, but it's all the same stuff. So I knew forever basically that this is something I cared about, but I never saw myself as a leader in this space, right? Like to this day, I still don't think I know how to sort my recycling properly. I hadn't gotten into composting until college. I didn't even really know what it was. But one thing I found myself doing time and time and again was trying my best to learn and take action and to be better. But I was finding myself in this loop of being like, oh, I want to do better. And then nothing would actually happen. And I realized, you know how when your parents are like, if all your friends jump off a bridge, would you jump off a bridge too? I would absolutely jump off the bridge. And so I was like, instead of that metaphor, what if all my friends and I got together to do climate action? And yeah, I guess more than being born out of a vision, Soapbox was definitely born out of vibes.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's so true that, I grew up in California for a short period of my life, but Northern California, it's so hot. I remember when I first moved to Washington, people were swimming in 80-degree weather, and I was like, it's freezing outside. What is everybody doing? And so I definitely was introduced to the reality of global warming slash climate change, the climate crisis early. And so I can relate to your experience of always knowing that it's something that was important to you and that directly impacted your life and that you cared about, but also the fact that with that knowing, you still didn't feel like you necessarily knew how to sort your recycling properly or weren't introduced to composting and didn't start doing that in your personal life until college. And knowing that there's so much room for improvement in terms of how we collectively and individually address the climate crisis, but also recognizing that it shouldn't necessarily be something that we have to do individually, because like you mentioned, then you're stuck in this loop of, I feel like I sort of know, but not really. And also
Yeah.
it's scary and hard. And so I love the fact that it really, Soapbox Project was really created out of vibes, because you're like, I want to do this with other people that are feeling similarly to me and that have that foundational value of this really matters because of X, Y, and Z. Like we can name all the reasons and we could talk about that for the entire podcast, but just knowing that this doesn't necessarily need to be something that we have to do alone. It shouldn't be. And so you took the initiative to then create that space for people to come together and fight climate action together. I think that's really, really awesome.
Yeah, one of the wake up calls of this concept of you don't have to be an expert to do something was definitely the 2018 wildfires season. So, as you know from the time that you spent in NorCal, yeah, it gets really hot. Wildfires happen every year, and within the past decade or so, it's become even more frequent, even more fatal. It's
Mhm.
not just something that Californians know about. Like, people are very familiar with California as a wildfire prone state. And in 2018, I was working at my first job as a tech consultant. My job was basically like making PowerPoints. It was it was nothing exciting. And meanwhile, 3 hours north of San Francisco, a town called Paradise went up in flames. And this would have already registered on my radar as, oh gosh, this is very close to home, but this is actually the town where my partner and his whole family lived. So
Yeah.
it was this jarring dissonance for me in 2018, November, to be like, there is so much destruction happening so close to where I am right now. And I and my colleagues are sitting here sending emails and refreshing Outlook and making PowerPoint. It did not sit right with me. So I went up, long story, very short, somehow convinced my company to give me like $20,000 in funding to go do a wildfire response project up in the Paradise area, basically studying community response. Because I wanted us to go there, volunteer, and then figure out like how do we recover from this? How does a community rebuild from this? And the company said yes. And so going up there, first of all, a random person, was able to get a significant budget and a team despite not having any expertise in this area. Like, I know nothing about disasters before this point in time. And also being on the ground near Paradise, it was incredible to see the way the community responded, playing to their strengths, but no one was really an expert in anything other than this church that turned into a makeshift medical shelter. They've been sheltering people through winters, through other flood risks, through other smaller wildfires. And so other than like, people were just leaning into their day-to-day lives. There was like the church staff, there were nurses, and then everyone else was just doing their best, figuring out what to do for food, figuring out how like call Sierra Nevada Brewing, who donated drinking water from their beer taps, basically. So that whole experience in November 2018 was such a huge moment of you don't have to spend your time studying and studying and studying to know all the perfect solutions, but you do need to join a group of people and not give up and get it done.
Yeah, I think that that is so inspiring as a student and as a young person who cares deeply about a lot of different issues. And I know that our listeners are the same, that we care deeply about a lot of different, specifically social issues, but we feel like because we don't have, the master's or the PhD, or
Mhm.
we didn't study how to actually devise, quote unquote, proper solutions to these issues, that it's not necessarily our place. And so I think I'm so inspired by and excited that you shared that story of like, I didn't know anything about this, but I recognized a need and it hit personally close to home because of my partner's relation to Paradise. And so I went to my leadership at my company and really painted the picture of this is an issue that needs to be addressed. And I think we have the resources to do it. Let me try. And this is why I think that I can succeed. And then being able to go do that. And then also like leveraging the expertise of the community of
Mhm.
how do they naturally respond to this disaster given how they all relate to one another? How
Yeah.
are they naturally working to support each other? And then how can we, with the monetary resources that we're bringing to the table, contribute support in a different way, but not, I really appreciate that the way you have spoken about it, that it was a community first, community centered endeavor.
Yeah.
And then you then were able to learn from that and acknowledge that climate action can't be done in a silo. It has to be in community. And so foraying that into Soapbox makes so much sense. And I think I want to emphasize for everybody listening that idea of you don't have to be an expert to start something and to create something. I think, I don't want to speak for you, but I think to your point of you just have to acknowledge that there's a need and bring the appropriate amount of passion to address it, I think that's more than enough to get started.
Yeah, I think, and then to add one more thing to that is also passion and humility. I find that a lot of people that are anxious about the climate crisis, including me in the past, we're so fearful. And so when we learn about a solution, I think a lot of our brains are like, okay, now I know what to do. I'm going to go do it. I'm going to go start a thing. I'm going to make a startup or a nonprofit or a product or a AI chatbot or whatever the case may be. And one thing I'm really, really glad I did, and I don't know even why I did this, but I'm so glad I had the instinct to ask first, like to call up one of the nurses and be like, if I brought a team of 8 people, would we actually be helpful given that we're
Mhm.
a bunch of city slickers that don't know the place? And I try to always remind myself that yeah, the passion is really important and the community piece is really important. And part of being in community is listening and not just talking. And I'm a big yapper, so that that's gonna be a lifelong lesson. Yeah, just internal, like not ignoring the centuries of work that has already come before you. And I think that's
Mhm.
something that sometimes gets missed in the Western climate movement.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's all so much of I think to your point of when you are very anxious and fearful and then you recognize that there's a possible solution that you can then emulate or incorporate into your immediate environment or whatever the case may be, and you feel like you found the thing and you can do the thing and you can be important and you can help. But that does kind of create a top-down model of I know, and depending on what background you come from and what monetary privilege that you might have in terms of
Mhm.
like, I have these resources, I can help you, but then not recognizing that, yes, that might be helpful, but it's also trampling over the centuries of knowledge that
Yeah.
the community that you're actually going into try to help, that's trampling over their expertise and not allowing them to actively be a part of the solution. And so I think that is so important to call out as well.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Soapbox Project is structured in three distinct but interconnected layers: your bite sized change letter, the membership community, and your in person vibraries. Why did you intentionally design Soapbox Project in this way? And how do you see these three touch points working together to move people from isolation to connection and from awareness to action?
So the way that this came about, a lot of stuff is just me in my own head being like, help, what do we do? So in 20 so 2018 was this whole kind of wake up call moment, and I took some time to process that, figure out what does this mean for me for all the things that I just experienced. So through work, I got to, chat with the CEO of Accenture where I was working at the time. I got to chat with a few people at FEMA and like other even private sector. Airbnb has slash had, I think they still have a great disaster response team. So talked to a bunch of private sector, public sector, nonprofit sector people, and also went on my own exploration journey of how do I get more involved in the place that I live. I don't live in paradise. I lived in San Francisco at the time. Now I live in Seattle. So that was a year of basically integrating and continuing to ask questions and talk to people. And then 2019, I was like, you know what? I need to write out for myself at least like a learning journey that works for me. And this was the heyday of when newsletters were starting to be a thing. I think that might have been the year Substack was founded or at least like started to pick up. So I was like, let me write a newsletter, except I need to do it differently because a lot of the newsletters I was reading, they were very long form and I don't have that kind of attention span. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do bite size change. We called it a change letter. It's still, I write it every single Wednesday. It's free. It's pretty fun. And sometimes it's unhinged because, again, it's just me and my thoughts, assuming that you'll read it. So I was like, what is missing from newsletters and from climate action newsletters is just like a lighter tone, first of all, because I was like, I know it's serious, okay, but we all know it's serious. So maybe we can have some jokes and some puns here and there. So yeah, there's bad puns. Sometimes there's good puns. And then the other main thing that was missing for me was a call to action because I'm the type of person that if you are someone I trust and you tell me what to do and you're like, hey, Nivi, stop buying I don't know, ceramic mugs or something, and you told me why I should stop, I'll probably do it. I'm open to ideas, and I think a lot of us are this way. We might donate to a cause. We might call our representative if one of our friends is like, do this thing. And a lot of the climate and social justice content I was consuming in that 2018-ish timeframe were very politics heavy. This was in the middle of the first Trump administration, and I was learning a lot, but I wasn't doing anything with my knowledge. So I decided I need to have this newsletter be bite sized and actionable and fun. So from there, we continued evolving. I never wanted to start a community. I wanted to be in a community, but I didn't want to start it because it's a lot of work. But as people were reading the newsletters, a lot of people would respond. And one of the most common things I would hear is, "Hey, Nivi, this is great. Love the newsletter. However, it feels so lonely. Like, I've been vegan for 6 years, but I feel like it doesn't matter because no one else, blah, blah, blah." And so finally, in around 2021, we reached this tipping point where I was like, I have to. People are literally begging for community and specifically begging me, and I can't ignore this. So I made some Twitter friends that wanted to do an action hour, which is exactly what it sounds like: gather, take action. So that's when, soon after that, we launched our online membership community that had action hours and courses and all sorts of things. And currently we're like deciding how to relaunch it, because the third major shift, as you said, Kellen, was our in-person gatherings, which we affectionately call vibraries, which are joyful third places for gathering for change. You can also think of what we're doing at Soapbox as climate church, because church is a real word that already exists. Every single Tuesday in Seattle, which is our first location, we gather and we meet each other and we have dinner and we learn stuff and we take action. So it's the same content or like the same topics as the newsletter and online community, like same monthly topic divided up into basically it's like an almost in-person version of what we do online. And I think that, we as humans, we engage with the world in so many different ways, online and in person, and probably more things I'm not even thinking about. So I was just really I've been interested in how do we maximize the surface area of climate action and community, and so that's how we got to where we are.
Yeah, I completely relate to your experience of reading newsletters or articles about the climate crisis and recognizing we all know that this is so serious. It literally is life or death. And at the same time, those of us that are aware, we are already aware. So sometimes it can feel like we're being just like
Mhm.
beat over the head of this is so anxiety inducing and depressing. And so also reading a lengthy letter of like it's just one thing after the other, I completely relate to your desire and experience of wanting a more bite-sized letter that is also actionable, because I totally agree as well that if my friend tells me like, hey, I called my representative. It was so easy. Here's a prompt, that you can use, like,
Yeah.
go do it. I've done it every time because
Yeah.
I trust them and they made it easy for me.
Whereas
And
if your friend sends you like a massive wall of text and
yeah,
your phone in the beginning of the day and you see that, it's like, well, I don't even want to I don't know
yeah,
what
it's
this
like,
is about. It can't be good.
no, like my do not disturb is now on. I will check on that when I'm emotionally able to do so. Yeah, totally. So I think having it be bite-sized of these are the things that are really serious and important for you to know. And we're going to sprinkle a little bit of joy and fun in there because we're all humans at the end of the day. Like we need that. We need to feel like there is some lightness around the darkness as well. And then having that call to action of, and this is what you can do now that you're informed. I think that structure makes so much sense for me personally, but I also think that it is a really innovative way to approach the climate crisis because that's not really how most people are doing it.
Mhm.
And then also recognizing that because it's an innovative way of furthering change, it makes so much sense that then you had people literally begging you to start the online community of how can we become more involved in this and how can I really connect with other people that have those shared values with me and that
Mhm.
want to create change around the issues that I'm also passionate about. That makes so much sense. And I think then with the in-person vibraries, which I love that name, I think that's so fun. It makes so much sense too that it's like, how can we marry what we're already doing online with in-person gatherings to co-create these solutions to the climate crisis together and help people, combat the loneliness epidemic, which we touched on earlier, and just feel like they have people in their corner that are care about the same issues and that want to further change together. It makes so much sense. And I think that it's really an empowering model for activism writ large, that we can't do this alone,
Mhm.
specifically around an issue that's as large and as important as climate change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And kind of this perfectly segues into that. At Soapbox Project, activism is intentionally joyful. Your libraries play a significant role in facilitating that joy. They center plant-based food, music, art, and community building as core features of climate action. Why does it matter that people feel good when they engage in climate action? And what role do you believe joy plays in sustaining long-term engagement with climate issues?
So we have a over 60% return rate, which means that on average, if you look around at any given soapbox event, half or more than half of the people that you see will have been there before. And I think that is the biggest indicator for me that what we're doing is working. It's not so much about like, let's grow the number of people at all costs. I think it's really, really important to reach more people and expand our audience. But that is the biggest indicator that people wanna come back, and so I think with your question about why does it matter to feel good, I don't know about you, but I don't go back to stuff if I'm not having a good time. Like, none of us if climate action or any sort of civic or social justice action, it's not mandatory. Obviously, we feel like we need to do it if we care about each other and about the planet, but we all have limited time in the day or think we have limited time in the day, you know? And I'm just like I'm thinking of myself as your classic like avocado toast millennial person. And yeah, I'm really not going to go out of my way to do something that feels icky and scary and like I don't like haunted houses. I won't go to a haunted house. So why would I go to an activism event that feels the same way? So really the biggest thing is I was just thinking like what are the types of spaces that I would want to hang out in because I think what's happening in the so there's obviously a mismatch, right? Like in the survey you cited in the 60% of Gen Z or young people or people in general if you're feeling anxious. There's another survey we cite often by a group called Wild Aid that cites like that number as 75%. So all this to say, a majority of people, and even more of a percentage of young people, are riddled by climate anxiety. Why is that not translating to a majority of why is that not translating to climate action being mainstream, right? Like you would think if those numbers translated to action, you'd just always be like climate action would be a fabric of our lives. Everyone would be casually on buy nothing groups and it wouldn't be this whole going out of your way to do it. Like we would just have more plant-based restaurants. We would not have as many steakhouses. It would be so casual if those numbers translated, but they don't. And so why don't they translate? I think there's many reasons, but for the one that convinces me is I think people put climate or like I think people have a separate bucket in their lives for volunteering and activism. And I think like if we all think about our own lives, it's probably some balance of like the top priority is either friends and family or work, depending on who you are. And then maybe your next priority is social plans. And maybe your next priority is alone time or flipped if if you prefer your alone time. And then if there's anything left to spare, it's maybe like your creative projects. And then finally, if you have time, once a quarter, you'll go to that farm and you'll harvest some carrots. And I think we need to make activism a part of our social plans bucket or our friends and family bucket and definitely our work bucket, although that's really important. It's just not a focus of Soapbox, but I think we need to raise climate action and just action in general as the fabric of our lives instead of this last dregs of the bucket when you barely have anything left to give.
Yeah.
So that is why the feel good aspect matters so much. Like, I want you to feel like, okay, I'm so excited for Tuesday because generally Tuesdays are boring days. But now every single week, I can go downtown and have a delicious dinner, maybe listen to live music, maybe make some art, maybe learn from an expert. And like, most of all, there's cool people there and I'm going to go hang out. And even if I get nothing done, I'm having a better day than I was having earlier. The aspect of feeling good and really attracting good people and good talent and good food, that is always going to be a priority for us because otherwise people aren't going to come back.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, I agree with everything that you said. And I think that it's so true that there's a variety of reasons for why those statistics about the realities of climate anxiety and loneliness as well, like aren't translating into whether or not people are convening in community to take action or whether they're just taking action around climate change at all. There's a variety of reasons, but I completely resonate with your perspective that joy and the fact that it's not centered in climate action broadly is a large reason why. And like you structured in terms of what people's priorities are, obviously it depends from person to person, but whether it's, family and friends, work, social, creative, and then like at the very, very bottom of your last remaining energy stores is what you might or might not give to volunteering and activism. And so creating an opportunity to bring that up to your social bucket or even to your family and friends bucket. I love that idea as well, that it's not just, oh, these are people that I see every
Mhm.
Tuesday. These are people that are now being brought into the fold of my life that now
Yeah,
I can have friends for the rest of my life.
yeah,
And I think so many people also struggle with making friends that or finding friends that have shared values. And so it's already right there for you of you guys both care about this issue and want to take action. And here's a convenient and really fun and joyful way to do that and to build friendships that will last for the rest of your life. I think that's wonderful in and of itself. But I think your point is so valid that joy matters because this work is too important to neglect. And
mhm,
too many people are neglecting it because it's not fun. It's more anxiety inducing. We're already anxious about the realities of the climate crisis. And so going to an event where now I just feel more scared about the world around
yeah.
me, I don't want to go back to that. I totally agree with you. And so making sure that it is informative, but also joyful and something that you want to come back to week after week, knowing that you're learning something, you're actually doing something, you're taking action, you're making a difference each week, and you're building relationships to either continue to, go on to the next thing with this group of people and create change in a different area or just continue working in the climate change and climate crisis space. I think that says it all. That's so, so important.
Yeah, and I think that we imagine activism as a thing in society to be so kind of mean and gatekeepy because the people that like, and this is obviously a broad generalization, but a lot of movement leaders are the ones where their volunteer and activism bucket is the top of their life. And I think it's important to have people like that. And I just think as humans, like that's not what we're meant. We are meant to prioritize our purpose and our friends and our family and that kind of thing. So I do think we need to embrace that more
Mhm.
instead of being like, you need to do more activism or else you're a bad person.
Yeah.
Because that's just not how we're built. We're built to tell stories around a campfire and eat good food and like work as villagers together. And we're not like out of the womb, like ready to go to a protest, right? So I think that's another important thing to like, I don't believe in fighting against our nature or like any of that kind of thing. And it's been really heartwarming to see over the past year, people have been bringing their out of town friends and family whenever they visit. Like, I was expecting, okay, my mom is in town, so I can't come to Soapbox this week. But no, people are bringing their friends and family members. And I think that's one of the best things that we've seen for me personally, because I think that shows that it's something that you want to show off. Like you're proud to be engaging in this and you want to show the people around you, like, this is what I'm doing every week or however often you come. So that's been such a perfect and such a cute validation of the this idea of infusing it into your whole entire bucket instead of your bottommost bucket. It's working. So yeah, it's been really fun to meet people's family and friends and just like college roommates or all of the things.
Yeah, that's so wonderful, and that's such a testament to the fact that this model that you've created works and is continuing to work, that people want to bring their family, that, that limited time that they might have to spend with their
Mhm,
family coming from out of town. I want you to come to this because not only is it important to me, but I think that you will enjoy it because it's fun and because we both likely, if they're related or it's their close friend, like they both care about the climate
mhm.
crisis and want to be a part of the solution and be a part of a community that's actively focused on mobilizing change around these issues. I think, yeah, that's such a testament to the success of the model, and I think that should be such a heartwarming kind of cute validation factor for you because that's so special.
Yeah, it's been amazing, and there's this one person that has been bringing her baby, and it's just I don't know, I can understand it's probably just so much easier to stay home, but yeah, she was talking about how it's been isolating, having a small child in a city, and now there's a place. It's not easy for sure, like, she has to leave early usually because the baby's crying or whatever, but she still shows like, they both show up, and I don't know, it's been really wonderful to see the various ways in which people are willing to inconvenience themselves because I think we're in this we are fed this myth that convenience is what we need. That's not what we need community, and they are often at odds with each other because community is inconvenient at its core. And it's been really nice to see the way people are inconveniencing themselves to show up to this thing that they care about. And I often get asked, what gives you hope? And it is these day to day interactions with people that are just doing things they don't need to be doing, but that are good for themselves and all of us and our planet. And I love it so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that really warms my heart in terms of there is there's a new way for approaching activism that really does feel good and then it can be folded into the fabric of our lives and it can be something that we look forward to and that allows us to make community building a little bit more convenient around something that matters so much.
Hmm.
Yeah, so from what I've gathered in learning more about Soapbox Project, I see it as a powerful reimagining of how sustainable community led change actually takes shape. It doesn't start with shame or guilt about the fear we might be feeling regarding the climate crisis. It starts with building relationships, connecting over shared purpose, and joyful participation in a movement that centers care, creativity, and community as tools for lasting social change. So I'm curious to kind of get into the how behind Soapbox Project. So first, how did you secure early funding or resources to start your venture?
Yeah, this was a hot mess. In 2020, this again, like the heyday of newsletters and venture capital for social impact and all of those things. In 2020, we incorporated as a Delaware C corporation because I thought that we were going to be like the Morning Brew or uh, the Skim or any of those other newsletters that were really taking off at the time. And I am so glad I did not do that because I really don't think the incentives of venture capital are aligned with what we're doing, and I, in fact, think they're complete opposites. That was like a weird time where for probably 2 years I was questioning, are we trying to raise external funding? Are we not? And in that time frame of like 2020 to 2022, we started testing different revenue streams, including the online membership community, including courses. We had a nice little phase of courses that was really fun and it worked really well. And we might bring them back. As I was mentioning, we are kind of like strategizing what we want to do now with our online community to make it kind of like work together with the things we're doing in person. So that was the first couple years. And then sometime around 2023, I had to stop lying to myself. I was like, this venture thing never gonna work. It's not gonna happen. I'm not trying to raise VC. So I was exploring other business models and I was always wary about starting a nonprofit for, the reasons that many people are wary, but it was the most kind of financially aligned with what we want to do. And a lot of people are skeptical of nonprofits or of starting nonprofits because it's a lot of oversight and governance and you need a board, and I liked that. I'm like, it's gonna be actually great. We should all be required to have some sort of basic governance. So in 2024, after a lot of paperwork, we became a 501(c)(3) nonprofit. Up till that point in time, the funding mechanism was thoughts and prayers, my savings, and then a little bit of revenue here and there, as well as like I did a lot of things on the side to support Soapbox. And one of the big things I did was like consulting as a community strategist, because I found out that was a skill for so long. Community building for so long has been unpaid labor and still continues to be unpaid labor. But there was this really brilliant time in like 22-ish where a lot of, especially like tech companies and stuff, were realizing community building is a capitalizable skill. So anyway, all that to say, I did a bunch of speaking engagements that were paid and community freelancing, all of this stuff, which finally led us to 2024. We became a nonprofit, and that was definitely the right decision. Like within a year of being a nonprofit, we raised our first $100,000, which was like 100,000 more than what we've been bringing in the past basically 4 years. So yeah, it's been a combination of grants and partnerships with people that know people that know people. And our venue is donated to us in kind for us to use every week, which is the biggest obstacle other than like straight up funding. So yeah, it's been a lot of like traditional sources like grants and stuff, but it's also been a lot of just like asking people open-ended questions of, hey, this is the vision, this is what we want to do. We're trying to basically build this thing that's like a climate church. What can you do to help? Because people always want to help. So yeah, the past year and a half was all put together based on just everyone in our community working together to jigsaw the resources.
Yeah, I this question is one that I always love to ask because it really paints the picture that there's not a one-track way to create what you're excited about and to create the solution that you are passionate about bringing to life. And I think it's really valuable that you thought that potentially VC might be some pathway that you wanted to take, and then you realized that it actually wasn't aligned with what your broader vision for Soapbox is, and it doesn't necessarily make sense for how you want to actually serve those that want to engage with Soapbox. And so veering away from that and landing on launching a 501(c)(3) nonprofit instead, and recognizing that like once we locked that down, the opportunities opened up where we were able to get that $100,000 of funding pretty quickly. And we then were able to also leverage your support network. And this kind of segues into the next question that I had for you in terms of how did you kind of go about building a team or support network to bring your mission to life? And how did you speak about the problem and your vision to get others to believe in it and want to be a part of that solution that you were creating, in terms of talking to the people that manage the venue that you use every week and leveraging a relationship with them where they see the value in what you're creating and are kind enough to offer that space to you? Like, how did you kind of recognizing that, okay, the nonprofit organization is the right kind of funding track for us? How did you then leverage and build relationships with others to ensure that you can continue to move Soapbox in a like upward trajectory and make sure that people can engage with it?
Yeah, I think this is a really important question and something that I spend a lot of time thinking about. And there's a phenomenon that happens to me every time I want to give up, which is a lot, but like sometimes it's, really intense. Should I just quit everything and who cares about this? But every time I'm in my peak despair of what am I doing with my life, somebody reaches out to me and is like, when's the next whatever? Like, when's the next book club? When's the next thing? So I feel like every time I've wanted to quit, there has been a member of our community that's reached out and just shown me that like I can't give up because people are actively looking forward to the next thing. So to answer your question about how do you get people to rally around the vision, that's not a challenge that we had, because as I was telling you, like people were asking for this. So for us at Soapbox, it wasn't so much like here's a vision, we need to convince people. It's kind of like people are like, okay, something needs to change, but we don't know exactly what. And then I came with this offering that's like, okay, here's what I think. Do you agree? And then we do a little bit of refining together to figure out what the end thing is. And so I think that the rallying interest is not difficult. But I do think like this question of how do you sustain that, that's been really, really important to think about because although we have a small handful of part-time staff on board, 3 part-time staff, including myself, it is mostly volunteer. Like we would not be able to do any of this stuff without our volunteers. And I need to update our impact stats, but from the first 6 months we logged over 1,000 hours of volunteer hours. So that like people are really putting in the work to make this happen. And so I've been asking myself, like, why are they why are they doing this? They could be doing anything. It goes back to the bucket thing of like social life. And then it also, this was a really unexpected thing. I heard you say it too, like care, creativity, and community in your question from earlier. And something I find really fascinating, creativity was never part of my intention for Soapbox, but it is something that a lot of people that hear about it and engage with it say and observe. And so I think it's become like the soapbox space in Seattle has become a space for people to tend to their own creativity. So it's not about like, okay, what are you going to do about the climate crisis? After college or after schooling, there's basically no places where you can go have an idea and talk about your idea with people and then make your idea come to life. Like that doesn't really exist outside of school, you know? And I think people really crave that like kind of like group project in the best way thinking. So that is like to take it into the real world of how this actually happened. It all started with one volunteer, Czar, who heard me pitch this idea December 2023 when I was like noodling on all this. And he would not stop pestering me. He was like, okay, what about like the thing that you said? When are we doing it? When are we doing it? And I did not know this guy at all beyond that one event. And it just really showed. Again, I was like, well, Zavar needs me to do it, so I need to do it. And so it started with one volunteer that was like, I will do whatever needs to be done, but you need to show up and you need to tell me what to do. And I think up till that point, I felt very anxious about burdening people, but that experience taught me that like there are people who want tasks and I need to give those tasks. And so that helped me like loosen up more and step into leadership because I was like, well, who am I to be asking people to do things with their free time? And so Zavar showed up every single week for our 8-week pop up in 2024 and basically shaped it. And we started to get some new, like, as people see it in action, I think it makes it more obvious if you want to volunteer or not, because you're like, well, wow, I didn't know they were having concerts. Maybe I could help find the musician in a couple months. So it's, I think, once the wheels are turning, it makes it a lot more apparent where you can plug in. But yeah, those early days were definitely a challenge, and it was definitely like this one other person that was like, what's next? And don't think without him, like I don't know what it would have been without him. Anyway, I wrote him a letter of recommendation. He goes to Harvard now to study community design. So
Oh my gosh, that's
themes
awesome.
continue.
Yeah, full circle. I think to your point of, like it wasn't hard to rally interest in what we're doing because everybody, like you said, everybody's aware that, the climate crisis is so real, and everybody is also aware of the fact that it's very anxiety inducing. And so venture that's creating more opportunities for joy around this, like who wouldn't want to be a part of that? But then recognizing from the leadership perspective of how do I delegate these tasks? Do I burden somebody with this? Like there's so much to be done because we're trying to do so many important things. Kind of trying to balance like what is my role here in delegating. I think that's really wonderful that you are like acknowledging that and sharing that you're still kind of figuring it out. Like even when you were, like you mentioned in 2024 where you had secured Soapbox as a nonprofit, really kind of like hitting the ground running there. But you had been working on this for the past 4+ years, stepping into this new kind of era of Soapbox and figuring out like how do we approach this and how do we continue to cultivate the support around it for in terms of garnering volunteers, those that really help us bring it to life and make it happen. I think it's admirable that you're like, I I didn't necessarily know, and I had to really trust and invest in this person who kept showing up and who kept
Yeah.
being like, I care about this and I want to be a part of this. Like, give me something to do. And so putting that trust in him, and now that he's going on to do community design, it's so apparent that that clearly, I mean, I don't want to speak for him, but I'm assuming that his experience working with Soapbox and working on building a viable model for community around a social issue that matters to so many
Mhm.
people. Like it's so clear that if it impacted him that much, that it makes so much sense why other volunteers continue to come back, because they're seeing that what they're doing is that it matters, and it's
Yeah.
also fun too. Like if
Yeah.
you are also, as a volunteer, a part of the community that you're working to build. So it's not just I'm here to work, but I'm here to
Yeah.
enjoy and to have this be a part of the social bucket of my life as well.
Totally.
Yeah. So to kind of wrap up, I'm sure that you'll have a lot of things to say about this, but I'm curious what advice you might offer to someone with an entrepreneurial mindset and desire to do impactful work and make a change in their community or field.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is get started. Like, get started with all of the caveats of, okay, so I think there's common wisdom that's that is done is better than perfect. And I have some very complicated feelings around this because sometimes I do think it's better to not start something at all, right? Like I simultaneously believe that perfection is the enemy of good, and also sometimes you thinking that you're doing good can be harmful. So I think the big caveat of all this is like you do need to have some learning in place, not to be an expert, but to just like, you know, check check it out. Check what you're doing. I think in in entrepreneurship in general, there's a lot of ideas guys, gender neutral ideas guys that are like, "Oh, what about this solution?" And it's like, dude, if you spent more than 2 minutes thinking about this problem, you would know why this doesn't work. So, other than like don't be an ideas guy, I would say just like make progress and don't sit around on your goals. The second thing I would say is calibrate as much as you can with the people around you, because I think that there's a lot of misconceptions in this work around money, like for your own self, like money, time, resources, all of the things that are foundational to the work, but maybe not part of the work itself. So I would say definitely calibrate that as much as you can. And yeah, probably the third thing I would say is just like know yourself well enough to know what kinds of contributions that you want to make. For example, I'm not a visual artist or like any sort of arts and craftsy person. And so it wouldn't have made any sense to make that. Like early on, it would not have made sense to make creativity a part of what we do at Soapbox. And that emerged naturally. And I would say like I know I like to plan parties, you know, but I don't want to make an app. I don't want to make a website. Um I mean, we have a website. That's not the point of this. But yeah, I would just say like being really in touch with what like the type of person you are, cuz also some people are much more suited for short-term projects. Like they love getting things off the ground, but they don't love sticking with it. And I don't think that's a flaw, but I do think if you know that you're the type of person that wants to launch things and not stick with them, that results in a very different type of venture, or maybe you learn that you are like not the primary founder. So I think my heartbreak comes from a lot of good ideas and good products and good services that have been abandoned. This happened a lot in like 2022 to 2023 when online communities were getting off the ground. So many people were like, I'm going to launch an online community, launched it. It was great. And then it fizzled. So, yeah, I would say like the third thing is it's not the hardest part isn't. I really don't think the hardest part is starting. I think starting is quite easy. It's shiny new toy syndrome. I think the hardest part is sticking with it, and yeah, just knowing yourself well enough to decide early on like what the scope of your project is going to be and what your role is going to be within that. I think those are all some really important things.
Yeah, I love everything that I heard in there. I think it is so important, referencing what we talked about earlier of like, you don't have to be an expert to start or to make a change, but being curious enough about the problem that you're interested in solving, like do your homework and think about, okay, is this idea that I have actually feasible, or has somebody tried it and there's X, Y, and Z reasons why it doesn't work? Like you mentioned about not just being an ideas guy, but being curious about why do I care about this? Like, what are my, values for one? Like, why do I want to bring this to life? Do I have some knowledge to get myself started? Do
Mhm.
I know people in my network that can help me? And then also what you mentioned about like calibrating it with other people, like talking to people who are smarter than you or who have expertise in this subject and might be able to tell you, yeah, no, that's not going to work. Or I see what you're thinking there.
Yeah.
I want, like, think about it this way because I know this person and they might be able to help you. But then also to your last point of just knowing your work style and knowing
Yeah.
that starting is possibly the easiest part of recognizing that it is that kind of shiny new toy syndrome and sticking with something that is hard, like entrepreneurship is going to be hard. And so
Yeah.
knowing how you work and knowing that, oh, if I am somebody I have so many ideas to bring to the table, but I'm not necessarily the executor, I'm more the visionary.
Yeah.
You might not be the primary ops person, or you just recognizing like, what are your strengths? What do you value? Have you checked it out? Have you looked around to see, does this solution exist? Is it feasible? Is it possible? Do I know people that can help me? Just do your homework, I think, and know yourself. I think
Yeah.
that's so important. And I think you had so many golden nuggets in there, but I wanted to recap because I think they
Yeah.
all were so important.
I no, thank you for recapping. And I'll say like this piece around I think it's really comes down to taking stock of yourself and your resources. I think if I had to now to nugget your nuggets, it's like to summarize it into one thing. I think it is taking stock of your resources because it's like beyond your ideas or your expertise. It's also like, okay, my parents own a house, so I'm not going to be out on the streets if this idea fails. And then even with calibration, it's like, if someone came up to me and was like, Nivi, should I start a similar thing to what you're doing? I would be like, are you willing to go multiple years without a paycheck? Like, those are really important questions to be upfront about. And yeah, I think it really comes down to taking stock of what you have and who you are and who you're with. And then besides that, just like, don't forget that first and foremost, you're a human. And like, really all of this matters, but also none of it matters. And like it's just important to remember that we're just like specks of dust
On the
and
floating rock.
yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on today and for providing all of that sound advice and sharing more about Soapbox Project. I learned so much, and I know that our listeners will too. And I'm excited to get involved with the Soapbox Project. And for any listeners that were inspired by the episode today and want to get involved as well, I'll have all of their information in the episode description and show notes below. So yeah, just thank you so much for coming on. It was such a pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you so much for having me, Kellen. This was wonderful.
Of course. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Her Entrepreneurial Rise podcast. The Her Entrepreneurial Rise podcast was founded, hosted, and produced by me, Kellen Tamurian, president of the We Lead Student Board, with support from the Burke Center for Entrepreneurship in the Foster School of Business at the University of Washington. I'm so grateful to have you along for these conversations, amplifying the stories of impact-minded women and gender-expansive innovators whose ventures and life's work shine a bright light on the radical possibility of entrepreneurship as an engine for positive social impact. If you'd like to learn more about the entrepreneur or leader featured in this episode, their journey, business, and mission, be sure to check out their website and social media platforms, all linked in the show notes. There you'll also find a list of the statistics, articles, and resources mentioned in this conversation for your further research and exploration. To stay connected with the Her Entrepreneurial Rise podcast and the Women's Entrepreneurial Leadership Program at the Burke Center for Entrepreneurship at the University of Washington, follow us on social media and visit our website, both linked below. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please rate, review, and share the podcast with a friend, classmate, or fellow believer in the power of entrepreneurship to spark positive change. Your support truly means the world and is the best way to help grow the show. I'm so happy you're here and part of the Her Entrepreneurial Rise community. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.